This is Angela Gartner at northeastohioparent.com. We are here with Dr. Khandelwal, the medical director of the Adult and Pediatric Burn Institute at Akron Children's Hospital. We are talking about some summer safety tips with fire pits, grills, and fireworks. With so many people using outside grills either at home and in the park, what are some best practices you would say when using those grills outside?
They are responsible for a number of injuries that occur every year. And so some statistics would actually say that roughly about 5,000 people or so are injured every year as a result of utilizing a grill. And so there's a number of things that we can do to be safe when utilizing a grill. So first of all, make sure there's no gas leaks, right? Before firing up the grill, make sure there's no gas leaks. That's first and foremost. Secondly, never operate a grill indoors. So don't utilize a grill in the garage. Don't utilize it in a tent. Just make sure it's in an outdoor, well-ventilated space, right? And then the third thing is, that's another thing that's very important, is make sure you keep kids away from that area. So some people recommend, and I do the same, is that keep a minimum of about 3 to 5 feet kind of perimeter around the grill and make sure the kids don't really get into that area because you never know what's going to happen. And you want to make sure that you keep the kids, kids away from the grill. So I would say those are kind of the basic safety tips in regards to, when you're grilling outside. Naturally, always have a bucket of water, fire extinguisher, if applicable, have those present nearby, and just make sure that you're being safe. Try not to use a whole lot of accelerants because once again, those can really exacerbate the flame and cause much more significant injuries. And so those are kind of the more common things that, that we would, or a more common advice that we would give.
With fire pits and campfires popular during the summer season, whether families are at home or away, what are some ways people can enjoy the fire pit safely, especially how can they be prepared in case of a fire emergency?
Fire pits, campfires, a great way to enjoy the summer. And we're not saying that you can't do those to enjoy the summer, but you do have to be careful. It's interestingly enough, very similar to the grills. The campfire related injuries account for about 5,000 visits a year, to the emergency department or burn centers. A lot of them are actually pediatric patients because they stumble into the fire pits or the campfires and they get some pretty significant burns in their hand. And so there's a couple of really important things to remember in order to be safe around the campfires. Number one, don't be misguided, but a campfire can actually cause a very significant burn and can actually lead to some very serious injuries that can cause functional limitation, once again, especially in that pediatric population. Number two, make sure that you don't utilize any accelerants to either start or reignite the fires. Or if you are going to use something, just be extremely careful with it, right? Make sure the can is away. Make sure you're not utilizing a whole lot, but ideally don't utilize it because a lot of the burns that we see from campfires are related to people using accelerants onto the campfire. Number three is make sure you fully extinguish the campfire or the bonfire or whatever. Make sure you do that with water and not dirt, okay? Because sometimes the dirt just covers it up and there could still very well be some hot embers underneath, but make sure you extinguish it with water. One of the common misconceptions is that once the fire pit is out or once a campfire is out, that it's relatively safe. You can kind of go nearby it. Even if kids are around, it's not going to be a problem. But you have to keep in mind that those hot ashes and embers can actually stay hot for 24 hours. We've had a number of instances where either kids or even adults are outside and they kind of get into the campfire about 24 hours later or just under 24 hours later. And once again, they can sustain some pretty significant burns. So it's very important to make sure that, as I mentioned before, make sure that you douse it with water, put it out with water, and fully extinguish it with water. And then also keep in mind that it can still be hot for about 24 hours. So for about 24 hours afterwards, still kind of keep, kids, away. And then even the adults should be very mindful. Another easy safety tip or tool that we can utilize is a screen, right? So many of these outdoor fire pits, that we can either purchase, they may have a screen that goes along with it. And so that's always a good thing to have because once again, that can, really mean the difference between a significant injury and a not so serious injury. The other thing that I would suggest is, once again, very similar to grills and fireworks, is keep that perimeter around the campfire, safe, right? So don't allow kids within about 3 to 5 feet. Granted, the kids are probably going to want to cook some s'mores, which is great. I know my kids like to do the same thing, but just make sure that you're being very responsible and they're being supervised when they're cooking s'mores.
And it is summer fireworks season. So, how can parents and children stay safe around fireworks? And along with that, it's just not fireworks, but also sparklers as well.
And fireworks is kind of a whole different ballgame, right? But we will see a number of firework related injuries. And the most common injuries that we see there, once again, about 35% of the injuries that we see are going to be kids less than the age of 14 or 15. So a number of the injuries are younger kids, right? They're getting burned as a result of fireworks. And about 60% of the firework related injuries that we see are going to involve very sensitive areas of the body. So that includes the hands and the fingers, as well as the face. And as we can tell, right, those are very important areas of our body. They're responsible for a lot of function. Those are not areas that you want to get injured, but unfortunately, they are the most commonly injured areas. With sure. So, in regards to the sparklers, it's very important to realize that sparklers can get very hot, right? So that tip of the sparkler can actually get to about 1,500 to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. If you think about it, that's hot enough to burn metal. And so the tip of the firework or the tip of the sparkler can actually get very hot. So while we always tend to give the sparklers to the kids, because we think it's easy and we think it's safe, it's very important to remember that sparklers can cause significant injuries. So once again, even with sparklers, use them with caution and make sure that the kids are supervised. In regards to fireworks in general, there's a couple of tips that we would offer. And so first and foremost is make sure, if possible, leave the fireworks up to the professionals. That's probably the easiest thing to do. If you are going to utilize your own fireworks, make sure they're in an open area. Make sure there's no other, gasoline containers or anything flammable that's nearby. Make sure there's no people nearby. Make sure you're buying fireworks from a legitimate source, right? Don't utilize fireworks from the previous year or from years ago. That's another thing to keep in mind, because sometimes they just won't light the normal way, right? And will be misguided. Make sure that the children are supervised. Once again, keep that perimeter around the area where you're lighting the fireworks. Make sure children don't enter that area. And make sure that if they are going to enter that area, make sure they are very well supervised. Make sure people know where the kids are, when they're lighting the fireworks. Other important tips: make sure you have a bucket of water nearby. And so when you're done lighting the firework or that sparkler, throw it into that bucket of water, right? Or throw it into a bucket of water. Never light a firework a second time, right? So if you light it and you think it's not going off, don't walk back up to it and try to light it again. That's also a cause of a number of injuries that we see. Light one firework at a time, right? Don't try to light multiple fireworks at a time or try to do any tricks or stunts or anything like that. But those are kind of the more common safety tips that we can utilize with fireworks.
And as far as in burns, so can you talk a little bit about, the burns and what you see as far as in the first degree burns, the second degree burns? Can you talk a little bit about that and those treatments of those kind of burns?
Sure. So for the most part, as you said, right, we do divide burns into first degree, second degree, and third degree. And so typically the first degree burns are going to appear like a sunburn. And that's exactly what a sunburn is. It's really just a first degree burn where your skin's just red or pink. A second degree burn typically will manifest with blisters, right? And so, we'll see that with scald related burns very frequently, where they develop some blisters afterwards. And then a third degree burn is going to be where it's much deeper. So typically with the fire or flame related injuries, we're going to see those deeper third degree burns. And that's where the skin's going to have a little bit of a charred appearance, or it may appear kind of that leathery brown or white type of appearance. There's a couple things to keep in mind. First degree burns or a sunburn can be very painful. A second degree burn with the blisters is also going to be very painful. A third degree burn, interestingly enough, is not going to be painful. And so oftentimes people are misguided because they feel that, hey, my burn doesn't hurt me, therefore it must not be that deep. When in fact, a burn that is not painful, especially where some of the skin is missing, that's usually indicative of the fact that it's a deeper burn or a much more severe, injury. Basic first aid treatment. So for a first degree burn or a sunburn, moisturizing lotion, aloe vera, things like that are probably going to be, are going to be enough, right? For a second degree burn or a third degree burn, you'll want to cool those areas off as quickly as you can. So don't run it under cold water, but run it under cool water. Do not apply ice to those areas, right? But, run it under cool water. Sometimes you should do that for about 10, 15 minutes. So especially if the temperature of whatever you got burned with is higher, so a fire or a flame or a hot grease as opposed to just water, you'll definitely want to irrigate those areas for maybe closer to 20 minutes, maybe even sometimes a little bit longer. But that does make a difference. Once you're done with that, you'll want to kind of cover it up with either a clean cloth or some non-stick gauze or non-stick bandage. And if the burn appears to be deeper, meaning if you don't have much sensation over the burn, or if it's larger than about half a palm, half the size of your palm, or if it's present over, say, your hands, your fingers, your feet, your toes, your face, or over a major joint, over your elbow, over your knees, on your neck, then for those reasons, or if you have those kind of injuries, you'll definitely want to seek medical attention.
Well, I mean, is there any kind of things that parents can do to ensure that kids are safe from fire before they actually set up the fire?
So there's a number of things that we can do to prevent injuries, right? And so first and foremost is if your kid is at the age where they can comprehend and understand, go over some basic fire safety tips with them, right? Talk to them about the dangers of the grill, the dangers of the fireworks, and the dangers of the campfire. They're fine to enjoy, right? Once again, we all like to do that over the summer, and we're not saying that the kids shouldn't enjoy that, but there is a safe way to do it. So make sure you educate your kids if they are at that age where they can comprehend and understand what's going on. The second thing is make sure that if you can, once again, set up that perimeter for them, right? Make sure that they know that they shouldn't be within 3 to 5 feet of the campfire or the grill or wherever you're lighting the fireworks, right? That's going to be, very important as well. And then the third thing, for the kids is if they are going to be closer or within that 3 to 5 feet perimeter, just make sure that they are very well supervised, right? Make sure the kids don't go there alone. Make sure they know that if they want to approach the grill or if they want to approach the campfire, they're announcing it, letting someone know that, hey, I'm coming closer, right? Or that they're telling someone, hey, I want to go see the campfire. I want to go see, what's cooking on the grill. So those are kind of some basic safety tips that they should go over and preventative tips, I should say, that they should go over with the kids. The other thing that's really important is to make sure that you educate your kids a little bit about kind of that, what to do if there is a fire. And so simple things like stop, drop, and roll is very important. Making sure that there's, a water or a fire extinguisher nearby. If it is a bucket of water, make sure the kids know that, hey, look, if anything catches on fire, go ahead and throw the bucket of water on there. Maybe a little difficult for kids to use a fire extinguisher, depending on the age of the kid, but a bucket of water is something that everyone can do.
And what happened? So one of my questions was, what are the common ways people are getting burned in fire? Are there ways, besides, sticking their hand out, are you guys seeing kids or adults falling into fires as well?
Yes, so there's a couple of different common scenarios that we come across, right? So with the grill, a lot of times it's just accidental stuff. You trip, you fall, a hot burger is landing on someone, grease is being spilled. Depending on what kind of grill it is, sometimes some kids are getting into it. Sometimes we'll see some parents holding their kids next to the grill, which is really not a very safe thing to do. So those are some of the common things that we see, in regards to grills. In regards to the campfires, I would say that the vast majority of injuries, or a significant number of the injuries that we see related to campfires, are going to be kids falling into them, or walking into them. And so sometimes we'll see some very deep burns on the feet, very deep burns on the hands. Sometimes as they fall forward, they can even injure just kind of the front part of their body, or if they stumble into it, they can injure other parts of the body. So we'll see that with the kids. With the adults, unfortunately, we do see a lot of injuries related to either substance abuse, so alcohol or drugs. And so just once again, a quick safety tip is don't consume alcohol or utilize drugs when near a fire pit, or just play it safe. Right, that's the most important thing for adults, is just play it very safe, because we do see a lot of injuries related to to substance abuse or whatnot, and the campfires. So those are kind of some of the more common injuries that we tend to see.
Well, yeah, we've talked about a lot of different things here today. Is there anything that you want to say to people to make sure that they stay safe during this season where we're into fires and fireworks and grills and all things that could maybe harm you in a harm you by being burned?
Sure. So, once again, as I said in the beginning, right, the summer brings warmth, it brings that celebration, and it brings a lot of outdoor fun. But unfortunately, some of that can, come with a higher incidence of injuries, especially when we talk about fireworks, about grills, and about campfires. I think, the most important things to keep in mind is that anyone can get injured, right? We don't think that we're going to get injured, but remember, anyone can get injured. And oftentimes, it's not ourselves who are getting injured, but it's someone else who's getting injured. And oftentimes that can be a child, right? And so, a couple of important things to keep in mind. Once again, the basic safety tips is when you're working with campfires, when you're working with grills, when you're working with fireworks, make sure you have some safety equipment nearby, right? Make sure you have a bucket of water. If applicable, make sure you have that fire extinguisher. Once again, keep kids in a safe zone, 3 to 5 feet away from those sensitive areas, right? Or if they're going to be within those sensitive areas, make sure that they're very well supervised, because all it takes is a split second, right, for someone to get injured. And we naturally don't want that to happen. And then once again, keep in mind just the basic first aid for a burn related injury and when to seek medical attention. But other than that, we really hope that everyone enjoys their summer. It's a great time to be outdoors. We encourage people to enjoy it. Once again, there's no problem with grilling outside. There's no problem with having a campfire and having, some s'mores and enjoying those 4th of July fireworks. But we do want to make sure that everyone's safe while they do it, so that they can have an enjoyable summer.
Well, and how can people learn more about the Burn Institute and about Akron Children's?
Sure. So great question. So here at Akron Children's, right, we do take care of adult and pediatric burns, something that most people don't know. We take care of patients from all different extremes of ages, and we take care of patients with all different types and degrees of burns, from some of the more simpler, related burn injuries to the most complex burn injuries that you can see. And we do provide the full spectrum of burn care. So we go all the way from doing some prevention efforts and outreach efforts in schools. We take care of the patients while they're here in the hospital. And then we also take care of all of their reconstructive needs as well, if they need some scar revisions or management. And then we also provide other support services, to them as well. So to our adult patients and to our pediatric patients. If they want some more information, they can visit the website, so akronchildrens.org, and they can follow the links to the Burn Center. They can also give us a call. And so that number is 330-543-BURN, or 2876. And they can always get some more information from one of those sources. We're happy to help the community. And once again, we look forward to everyone enjoying their summer.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us. Again, if you want more safety tips on and about Akron Children's, we do have more information also at northeastohioparent.com. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Khandelwal.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mhm.